Season 3 of the Press Box. I am Larissa Ellis, Communications Officer for the Virgin Islands Office of Disaster Recovery and your host for this episode. Today we mark the 5-year anniversary of Hurricane Irma, one of the most devastating hurricanes to strike the territory, only to be followed weeks later by another storm, Hurricane Maria. Many of us can recount the hours leading up to their impacts, the angst of waiting for the storm to pass, and the aftermath. In 2022, the U.S. Virgin Islands is continuing to rebuild. Our recovery from those disasters remains at a remarkably steady pace. In this episode, we take a closer look at the stories of progress and transformation as we rebuild our infrastructure for this and the next generation. Joining us for this conversation is Adrian L. Williams-Octolin, Director of the Virgin Islands Office of Disaster Recovery, Lydia Pell, Chief Operating Officer for the Virgin Islands Housing Authority, Darryl Smalls, Executive Director of the Territorial Hospitals Redevelopment Team, and joining us remotely is Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority's Chief Executive Officer, Andrew Smith. Welcome, Director Williams. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So there's been quite a bit of wind and rain today, and I'm sure that many of us are having the unfortunate flashbacks of what took place a few years ago. Tell us a little bit about your experience during the storms.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Larissa. I had flashbacks when the wind started blowing in Frederiksted near our office. We started battening down the hatches, and it's pretty much what we do when we see a storm is coming. And that's, when I look back at the times when, my brothers and we were getting out the plywood before we actually got hurricane shutters, and they're going to Kamakris in Frederiksted, and there were no more nails, there were no more screws, so people were just getting nails, and just the whole atmosphere of becoming prepared. I always say, this generation, there's no generation that's alive who do not understand the devastation that hurricanes bring and just the stress of the aftermath of rebuilding. But as Governor Bryan said, we're not rebuilding, we're actually transforming the Virgin Islands. And I take that very seriously. I take the job seriously, when we have to try to bring back some normalcy to our lives, to the infrastructure, the power issues, our housing issues. They're very near and dear, not only to my heart, but all of the members of the Office of Disaster Recovery and all of the other recovery partners across the territory who really bleed this transformation to really bring some resilience to the lives of the people of the Virgin Islands.
And as we look forward, fast forward to 2019, tell us a little bit about how the office actually got started. Well,
when the Brian Roach administration came in, one of the first things that the Department of Interior shared with Governor Bryan was that the grant that was made available to the territory to start an Office of Disaster Recovery was in jeopardy. So he immediately named myself to that position, and we started off by, again, coordinating with the Department of Interior to identify what this office would look like, because it's very typical when any jurisdiction receives a tremendous amount of money that they're able to start an office like this that'll be primarily responsible for recovering from that particular disaster.
Tell me a little bit about how your previous experiences have shaped how you approach your role today.
Well, I think it's the Lieutenant Governor that said, we've been called for such a time as this. And when I think about the road that I've taken to actually take on this task, I was the Executive Director for the Housing Finance Authority, where we did a lot of affordable housing, infrastructure development. We created roads. We built the entire subdivision and the path that we took to that. And a little bit after that, I was working on my own, doing some consulting, but then the storms came, and I applied with FEMA and worked in FEMA in various capacities, in the hazard mitigation program as well as with the public assistance program before Governor Bryan tapped me for this position. So actually had the experience of dealing with HUD, who now provides the CDBG DR funds, FEMA for the public assistance funds, and the FEMA hazard mitigation. So all together, in my knowledge of the government, of projects, of infrastructure development, of community development, really, I think, armed me with some of the tools necessary to take on such a bold, audacious challenge, which it is, but it also brings a lot of heartwarming feeling when it comes to bringing the territory in a position where we're absolutely more resilient.
Well, we're going to hear more about this and how all of these experiences help to shape the recovery and where we are today in just a few moments. We're going to take a quick break.
The U.S. Virgin Islands are in a region with high levels of vulnerability and threats for tsunamis. Here's some tips you should know. Listen for the sirens. It is important to understand the difference between an advisory, a watch, a warning, and an information statement.
If you're in a coastal zone area and notice a dramatic recession in water from the shoreline, move inland immediately and do not return until officials say it's safe to do so.
A tsunami can happen at any given moment, often without notice. Know your map and the nearest evacuation route and stay in the know.
Stay informed, stay prepared, and stay vigilant. Visit Vitema's website at vitema.vi.gov for more preparedness tips.
The more we know, the more we grow.
We're expecting a strengthening storm as it makes landfall. The right side.
Hey, babe. I listened to the radio and they said it's stopping strong.
Well, the house on lockdown and all the shutters are out. You should probably go check on anybody.
Okay, I think that's a good idea.
Alright, that's good.
So you don't know we don't think on our roof, we take care of everything we need to take care of?
No, we gotta check on Becca.
Oh, what you done today? Rebecca! You good?
Oh, hi. I'm okay.
We know you're expecting soon. We come to check on you.
Yes, I talked to my doctor. We have a plan.
Okay, no problem, man.
Take care. Bye.
Miss Carmen, you good?
Yeah, let somebody come and check on me.
All right, take care.
Okay.
Michelle. Evening. You ready for tonight? You know you went through a hard time last year with a hurricane, you know? If you want, you can come and stay away.
You know, I'm feeling nervous, so I'm gonna come tough it out for you, okay?
Hi, I'm Akil St. John, a proud member and president of the St. Croix Chamber of Commerce. This summer, our cruise ship partners announced plans to increase visits to the island of St. Croix during the upcoming cruising season. That's exciting news, but what does it mean for us? Well, now it's time for the business community, shop owners, taxi drivers, excursion providers, and foodie establishments to put together our best thoughts and ideas for crafting experiences that will make our cruise passengers want to stay, spend, and return. This is about all of us. On September 8th, the Office of the Governor, in partnership with Royal Caribbean Cruise Line and the Department of Tourism, will host USVI Business Forum 5 from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the University of the Virgin Islands Great Hall. Join us for a conversation with cruise experts about what passengers need and want when visiting our beloved St. Croix. Get some skin in the game and be a part of reshaping the guest experience. See you on September 8th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at UVI's Great Hall. For more information, visit www.vi.gov/cbf or call 340-774-0001.
While we're waiting for Mr. Smith, to cue in on his response, Director, tell us a little bit about how the authority has utilized some of the funds from FEMA and some of the processes that the authority has to go through to get their project started.
Sure. You know, we call WAPA the guinea pigs. They were really out front receiving the initial funds that were made available to the territory, of course, to put the power back on.
Right.
And what we've gotten funds to be able to do what we call Category B work, which is temporary work that's really getting the power on, the street lights, all of that. And then they moved into more of the permanent projects where they're building a lot more mitigation. So you see where they create, the Water and Power Authority created their plan for creating more resilient power, undergrounding, composite poles. So the plans call for composite poles to be placed in areas where it's just not feasible, where the undergrounding was not feasible. They've done a lot of work towards their substations. They've done a lot of work towards their transformation and distribution lines. So, you know, it's a lot that's going on. They're really creating a new opportunity over at Water and Power Authority.
Well, let's turn it back over to you, Mr. Smith. Right after the storms, what was it like for the authority?
Oh, good afternoon, and I appreciate the question. Earlier, I couldn't hear. I think you were speaking to me, but I couldn't hear you. So our system took very significant damage in the storms, and we think about the couple of different pieces of the company. There's a generation asset to make the electricity, and then there's the transmission and distribution assets that get the electricity to people's homes. When we think about the transmission and distribution system, approximately 95% of that was destroyed. Had to be completely rebuilt to get power restored to our customers. Within that transmission and distribution system, not only were wires and poles damaged, but we have substations and transformers that are critical components that help move the electricity out to customers that also had, seawater intrusion, other water intrusion, and related damage. On our generation fleet, we also had, a fair amount of seawater and other water penetration into those units. We had 3 of our units that were damaged during the storm. If we switch to the water side of the business, the water side during the storms was not necessarily impacted that meaningfully. The damage to the water system came during restoration because there was a very aggressive push to try to get electric service restored quickly to customers, which involved setting poles and doing other physical work to get service restored. And in the process of that, a lot of our underground infrastructure for the water system was pretty severely damaged.
I think that brings me to my next point or my next question. Tell us, how old are the facilities? How old is the equipment? Because that would speak to why it was damaged so easily during restoration.
So I would think about the age of our system in a couple of different pieces. The generating units are all fairly old, typically 30 plus years of age, with 2 exceptions. We have the new Wärtsilä units that are on St. Thomas, some 3 that are in operation, 4 that are being installed, and we lease Greco units on St. Croix. Those are relatively new units. However, everything else is largely fairly old on the generation side. When we think about the transmission and distribution side for electricity, the age of our substations, where the transformers and a lot of the equipment sits, some were Hurricane Hugo vintage, 1989. We've had some equipment installed 2009 and then some in 2014. So a little bit of a mixed age. When we think about the power poles and the wires out there, those ranged anywhere from 25 to 30 years old to literally a couple of days old, right? Because we're constantly going out and doing maintenance and repairs on that system. The water infrastructure is fairly old. When we look at our ductile iron piping, most of that is 50 to 60 years old. And so it is at its useful life. And in fact, is one of the big initiatives that we're working on replacing and upgrading that system.
Leads us right into really the heart of the conversation, transformation. Tell us a little bit about completed projects. I know you finished a water project in Frederiksted. Tell us about that.
Yes, the Frederiksted project, to your point, is a very transformational project. There was a $4.1 million project that was funded in part by the EPA as well as public finance. in the Virgin Islands. What that project did was replace, I mentioned the aged iron pipes in the water system. What that project did was replace that infrastructure in Frederiksted town with modern plastic piping. I mentioned 50 to 60 years useful life for the cast iron pipes. Plastic pipes have 100+ year life. So this is an infrastructure that should last and be very durable for the community for a very long time. As part of that replacement and upgrading process, we added a number of new meters that are all automated meters. We added as well, a number of additional valves on the system so that when we have outages, we can actually isolate much smaller groups of customers so that they're not impacted by outages. What's the benefit ultimately of all of that? Not only do we get better infrastructure, what happens is we get better water quality, better water pressure, just better performance out of the water system. It also helps the Water and Power Authority's cost because aged systems tend to suffer a lot of breakages and a lot of leaks. We have to pay for the water that we make, but if it gets wasted in the ground because we have a leak or we have some other disruption, we don't get any value for that, right? Because we've paid to make it, but we don't actually get to deliver it to anybody. And so replacing that old infrastructure really helps with that dynamic as well.
Some of the progress that we're making on the project front. Tell us a little bit about a recent approval for water projects in the territory.
Well, part of the issues that we have here, of course, is that we have aged infrastructure. And the Bipartisan Budget Act that was passed by Congress allowed for that specific issue in the territory as well as in Puerto Rico, where we not only have to look at disaster damage, but we can actually look at damages that are necessary in order to bring it up to industry standards. So recently, with the help of Widow O'Brien's and of course the Water and Power team, we were able to put together a case for WAPA where the FEMA will now replace all of the potable water lines on St. Croix, and the St. Croix project will be used as a model for St. Thomas, and we're already starting to put together that request for St. Thomas, St. John. So we fully anticipate that FEMA would allow us to be able to replace those water lines, drinking water lines, and that's very critical. In addition to that, our CDBG DR funds will also allow us to expand the water line system, where in areas where we don't have drinking water or potable water lines, we're able to provide those services to those customers.
Well, the future is bright and clear for water in the territory. Tell us a little about, Mr. Smith, about our power project. So tell us what's going on the power front. How are we making transformation and progress there? Director Williams, tell us a little bit about some of the gains that the authority has made with power.
Well, the funding that they've been able to secure, they've actually put to good use. We're really looking forward to the new generation projects at the Randolph-Harley Power Plant on St. Thomas, where it's going to actually help with the reliability as also to bring the cost down, because they're going to introduce some battery projects that would allow load shifting and also really keep the power on in St. Thomas, especially in light of those recent outages that they've been having. That project is moving along. It's funded again through CDBG DR, and we expect that these batteries, the first battery will be online in January of 2023. So you immediately start to see some of those cost savings back in the pockets of the consumers.
That's right around the corner. Well, it is live TV, and sometimes we have a few hiccups here and there. Mr. Smith, are you with me now?
I am with you now. I'm not sure what happened there.
That's okay. Tell us a little bit about how we're creating more resilient power in the territory. The status of the composite pole project, what's going on with that?
So the composite pole project, I don't know if you guys heard me earlier, there are two big initiatives that are underway. One is composite poles, the other is undergrounding. And the composite poles are replacing old wooden poles with modern composite materials, much stronger, can withstand 200-mile-an-hour winds. We have projects underway on St. Croix, St. Thomas, St. John, and Water Island. Water Island's 100% done. St. John is 83% done. St. Thomas is 72% done, and St. Croix is 69% done. So we continue to make progress getting that infrastructure put in place. And I know, over the weekend, we've had some pretty severe weather. Composite poles, obviously nothing like what they're built to withstand, but had no issues with that infrastructure over the weekend, despite having outage issues with the rest of our system. We're also undergrounding a lot of our infrastructure as well, and those projects are anywhere from 73 to about 85% complete, depending on the project.
So the director was talking a little bit about the Randolph-Harley project. That's a combination of funds, correct, Director?
Well, that's actually funded through CDBG DR, and that is actually it's more of a combination of projects where you have the new generation and the battery, the Watsella generators that they're installing, as well as the battery introduction for that plant as well.
And how are we going to transform power on St. John? Tell us about that, Mr. Smith.
So on St. John, we have a microgrid and emergency generation project that's in process. Right now, where we are in that project is doing the electrical interconnection studies to ensure how the parts fit together. What that project will ultimately do is make St. John able to be self-sufficient for electricity. So to give the audience a little bit of background, St. John is currently electrically interconnected to St. Thomas through 2 undersea cables. So disruptions on St. Thomas electrical supply can impact St. John. With the St. John emergency generation and microgrid project, St. John will have 2 Wärtsilä emergency generators, as well as some renewable energy and some storage, such that it could stand on its own and be self-sufficient if it needs to be. The other thing that the St. John project does is that it would be unusual, but to the extent that there was an upset on the St. Thomas system, St. John would actually be able to use its emergency generation in its infrastructure under this project to actually help provide electricity to St. Thomas.
Excellent. As we look forward, what are some of your plans as you continue to transform the authority for the future?
So one of the key things that we're focused on, Director Williams mentioned it earlier, is on the water subject, the prudent replacement that she mentioned. And I think she did a great job of explaining what that means. One thing that's also going to be very impactful about the prudent replacement process is FEMA looks at a damaged system, right? And I mentioned earlier we had a lot of damage in the water system in the storms. And FEMA then asked the question, well, should we just repair it? Or is it prudent to replace it? And the decision was that it's prudent to replace it because the system's old, the system's kind of damaged to a certain extent. So, well, it's not worth fixing it. We might as well just put new infrastructure in place. Where that's advantageous to the community is that prudent replacement brings the infrastructure up to best-in-class standards. So we're actually able to upgrade our system, not just replace things that were damaged. As mentioned earlier, we're looking at the same thing for the island of St. Thomas on the electric side. We are also in the process of considering whether that's something we need to look at for the electric side. I mentioned earlier we had generators that were damaged in the storms, and is that something we need to pursue on that side? We've talked about undergrounding and composite poles on both St. Thomas, St. Croix, and St. John. We also are in the process of pursuing projects on St. Thomas to go out and underground infrastructure there as well. So we've got a lot of exciting things going on that I think will really have an impact on our system over time.
Excellent. Where can the public find more information about this transformation and the work that you're doing? What's the best way to see what's going on with WAPA?
Well, I think there are several ways that you can do that. One, we have a lot of information on our website. Right, we talk about a lot of the plans that we're exercising there or executing there. The other is forums just like this. To me, it's very helpful to try to get out and talk to the community about what we're doing, the projects that we're advancing, and most importantly, the benefits that the community will receive from these projects. So there are a lot of different forums. We have an online presence on Facebook. So a lot of places that the community can go find out what the Water and Power Authority is pursuing.
For joining us for this segment. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
The U.S. Virgin Islands are in a region with high levels of vulnerability and threats for tsunamis. Here's some tips you should know. Listen for the sirens. It is important to understand the difference between an advisory, a watch, a warning, and an information statement.
If you're in a coastal zone area and notice a dramatic recession in water from the shoreline, move inland immediately and do not return until officials say it's safe to do so.
A tsunami can happen at any given moment, often without notice. Know your map and the nearest evacuation route and stay in the know.
Stay informed, stay prepared, and stay vigilant. Visit Vitema's website at vitema.vi.gov for more preparedness tips.
The more we know, the more we grow.
We're expecting a strengthening storm as it makes landfall. The right side.
Hey, babe. I listened to the radio and they said it's starting strong.
Well, the house on lockdown and all the shutters are tomorrow. You should probably go check on it.
Okay, I think that's a good idea.
All right, that's good.
So you don't know we don't think our roof, we take care of everything we need to take care of?
Oh, we gotta check on Becca.
Oh, what you done to? Rebecca! You good?
Oh, hi. I'm okay.
We know you're expecting soon. We come to check on you.
Yes, I talked to my doctor. We have a plan.
Okay, no problem, man.
Take care. Bye.
Miss Carmen, you good?
Yeah, let somebody come and check on me.
All right, take care.
Okay.
Michelle. Evening. You ready for tonight? You know you went through a hard time last year with a hurricane, you know? If you want, you can come and stay away.
You know, I'm feeling nervous, so I gonna come tough it out for you, okay?
Hi, I'm Akil St. John, a proud member and president of the St. Croix Chamber of Commerce. This summer, our cruise ship partners announced plans to increase visits to the island of St. Croix during the upcoming cruising season. That's exciting news, but what does it mean for us? Well, now it's time for the business community, shop owners, taxi drivers, excursion providers, and foodie establishments to put together our best thoughts and ideas for crafting experiences that will make our cruise passengers want to stay, spend, and return. This is about all of us. On September 8th, the Office of the Governor, in partnership with Royal Caribbean Cruise Line and the Department of Tourism, will host USVI Business Forum 5 from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the University of the Virgin Islands Great Hall. Join us for a conversation with cruise experts about what passengers need and want when visiting our beloved St. Croix. Get some skin in the game and be a part of reshaping the guest experience. See you on September 8th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at UVI's Great Hall. For more information, visit www.vi.gov/cbf or call 340-774-0001.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for joining us for that segment. We're going to switch over to housing for a conversation with Ms. Pell. So tell us a little bit about the difference between the Housing Authority and the Housing Finance Authority. That comes up quite a bit.
Hi, Larissa. Yes, that does come up a lot.
5 things to watch is...
So the Housing Finance Authority, they cater to families that are considered low to moderate income families, and the Housing Authority, we cater to those families that are considered low and very low income.
Okay. So when it comes to funding, do you manage recovery funding?
We do. Our recovery funds are managed from the perspective a lot of the physical improvements and damages that occurred in the 2017 storm. We coordinate a lot of the contracts for those improvements and also assist our families to make sure that they get any assistance necessary to help them through the damages they sustained.
Now tell us a little bit about those damages after the storms. I'm sure there must have been quite to a certain extent.
Yes, our communities, especially on St. Croix, on the west end of St. Croix, sustained quite a bit of damages. A lot of what we have focused our capital funds on is repairing the roofs at those communities, knowing fully well another hurricane season is coming up on an annual basis. So we focused on the roofs and the exterior of the buildings, and we're getting ready to start working on the interior of the buildings.
And tell us about some of those roofing projects. You have roofing projects on St. Croix, St. Thomas, and some that are already complete. So let's start with what's done.
Correct. So we focused, actually, the first project we did was on St. John, the Estate Adrian Community Center. It is leased by the Department of Human Services for its senior facility. We focused there. And then we came back to St. Croix on the west end of St. Croix, so Marley, in Michael J. Corwin Terrace on St. Thomas, on the west end of St. Thomas, and then in Nepal and Pearson Garden. Those facilities that sustained a huge amount of damage was where we put our focus. We're getting ready to start working on the roof repairs at Estate Bavoni and at H.H. Berg's home.
So now that we've covered repairs, let's talk rebuilding, because your agency is taking on a huge task of transforming housing in the territory. So tell us a little bit about the rebuilding efforts.
Yes, so in looking at the damages that were sustained, we took a step back and we realized, you know, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to leverage our FEMA funds along with other private funding and be able to truly repair and rebuild public housing facilities throughout the territory, so on all three islands as much as possible. With that, we put together a repositioning plan, and actually the plan was actually started prior to the storms. It was a vision of Mr. Robert Graham, our executive director, and our board of commissioners to actually start rebuilding public housing. And so this actually was a good thing for us. Right. It enabled us to move forward. It's a $1 billion plan for over 3,000 public housing units. And it's going to be great. As you know, we started with Walter I.M. Hodge, and it will go on from there.
Well, you can't rebuild without doing a little bit of demolition. So tell us about the plans that you have for JFK. What's the plan for JFK? And then let's switch over to what's your plans for Tutu, because your demolition project over there is complete.
Yes. John F. Kennedy Terrace it is one of the oldest sites on St. Croix. The transformation there was actually, should have been a lot more prioritized. We had to take a step back on JFK because of the issue with the blast zone on the Water and Power Authority, propane tanks, and a study that had to be done. In doing so, we later found out that we could still utilize a portion of the site. So in doing so, we've had our designers, our architects and developer, MDG out of New York. It is going to be transformed to a 90-unit public housing facility, or rather project-based voucher facility. It is going to be something you would see on the streets of New York. I mean, it is awesome. We did such an awesome job in that design. It took us a long time, but I assure the community they're going to be pleased.
Now, JFK isn't the only property. I know down in Frederickstead, you also demolished Ludwig Harrigan. What happened when you do these demolition projects? What's the next step for the residents? What happens to them?
Well, in demolition, demolition is a good thing. It's a sign of rebuilding. It's a sign of renewal. It's a sign of renewing your life and the things around you. So those residents in the 2-2 area, we demolished the phase 1, the first 5 buildings. We're getting ready to do another 52 units in another phase, another 96 units in another phase. But our residents, they were all relocated. They were offered Section 8 vouchers, or HCV vouchers, as we now call them, housing choice vouchers. And they had the ability to either go back to other public housing units. Again, we demolished the Ludwig Harrigan community in Frederiksted. There's something big coming for that, but we can't really talk about it today. Okay. But it's something where our residents, they know that they also have the right to return. And with that right to return, once the new facility is constructed, they have first preference to return back.
Great. I'm sure everyone is happy to hear that they were transferred safely to appropriate housing, and they have the right to return when it's complete. Now, there's big plans for Frederiksted. You have several things going down in that area. We talked about Walter I.M. Hodge. Tell us a little bit about the transformation plan that your agency is looking at for Frederiksted. You had some meetings about that as well.
Yes. We contracted with the Urban Land Institute to get feedback from the community and their input as we transform the Marley additions and Marley homes, rebuilding Ludwig Harrigan, looking at what we are doing now with the revitalization at Walter I.M. Hodge. And we wanted the stakeholders in the surrounding community to have input. Right. We could have done this on our own. We could have designed it, put it there, but we said, no, we are going to approach this in a community strategic mode where we hear from the community. What do they want to see? What do they need? What are the best approaches for how to redevelop these properties so it benefits them socially, economically, and to something that they always wanted to have and never had the opportunity to get. So we would bring that, have the ability to bring that to the community.
So we've covered your roofing projects that you've completed at Pearson Gardens and Kerwin Terrace, projects under construction at Marley, what you're doing at Walter I.M. Hodge. Now, what about the future? Oh, and how could I forget Dunu as well? So you have some construction going on there. But let's talk about the future of Virgin Islands Housing Authority. What's the next step in the transformation plan?
The next step is looking at, we're going to do a piece of home ownership, getting the Williams Delight home ownership piece off the ground, some additional senior housing, especially on the island of St. Thomas. We're looking for property, anybody with property that has for sale on the island of St. Thomas. We're looking into adding more and new housing to the territory, especially on the island of St. Thomas. We're going to saturate some additional property on St. Croix as part of a land swap that we're negotiating with the government of the VI for the Ralph D. Chabert property. So the next steps are multi-layered. Yes. There are a lot of things that you're going to see, our community is going to see going on. And at the same time, we're not neglecting the individuals that are in public housing right now. There is repairs coming to those units as well, and in short form, yes.
Well, Director, we're getting ready to wrap up the housing segment, but before we do, I definitely want to get your input on how you see things are going, and what is your input regarding housing in the territory?
Well, you know, affordable housing runs through our veins. It is really, really important for us to build up our housing stock within the territory. That was one of the first things that we get impacted by after the storm. I really want to commend the leadership at the Housing Authority for the work that they're doing to transform. You know, the storms brought funding that created opportunity, and they're taking this opportunity to transform all of our housing communities across the territory, doing some really, really, really creative things, layering funds. Yes. And I always say if there's any group that I want out there testing the layering of various types of federal funding together, it would be the Housing Authority. So we're looking for great things. I had the opportunity to pass through Walter I.M. Hodge yesterday, and they are in full swing. So we're looking for great things there.
Yes, definitely a lot of progress with the Housing Authority and the housing segments of the territory. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back to continue our conversation with Darryl Smalls from the Territorial Hospital Redevelopment Team.
Mama, I'm really scared.
Don't be scared. Remember, we're prepared. We have an emergency plan.
Be prepared for hurricane season. Visit doh.vi.gov for
are back with the man responsible for leading the Territorial Hospital Redevelopment Team, the THRT as we call it. Mr. Smalls, tell us a little bit about the THRT, why that was developed, why do we even need that?
Well, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity. The Territorial Hospital Redevelopment Team was a team that was formulated to bring all of the hospitals in line for the new construction efforts. The impetus is to be able to standardize all of the construction activities, all of the major systems and equipment that will be within each of the hospitals. Currently, if you look at JFL, you look at Royal Schneider Hospital, both were constructed in 1982, but with various different systems. So it's really hard for the staff to go from one facility or to help out the other facility. So this will be an opportunity to standardize all of our healthcare facilities across the territory, not just for the major pieces of equipment on the mechanical side, but also on the medical equipment side. And that will, provide a lot of efficiencies for our system going forward.
Well, we talked about aligning and standardizing those systems, but let's talk about creating those industry standards that's going to allow us to rebuild those hospitals. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Director Williams?
Well, again, that opportunity from the Bipartisan Budget Act is really giving us that foundation for us to build and rival any healthcare facility on the mainland. And what we're able to do now is just look at whatever the standards that we've submitted to FEMA and say, this is how we want to build our hospitals. This is what we want to be able to provide. And right now we're doing the costing so that we'll be able to begin constructing those facilities, designing the facilities, and constructing them to those standards.
This year has brought some progress, triumphs, accomplishments for hospitals. Tell us a little bit about the approvals that we can now say that we've accomplished.
Well, yes, first and foremost, the Juan F. Louis Hospital was recognized as a prudent replacement, so we know that we're going to build a brand new state-of-the-art facility for the island of St. Croix. Similarly, on the island of St. Thomas, the Roy L. Schneider Hospital received a prudent replacement, thereby paving the way to construct a brand new facility also on the island of St. Thomas. And of course, most recently, the Charlotte Kimmelman Cancer Institute actually received its funding also as a prudent replacement to the tune of over $50 million, of which we've already begun the selection process to begin the demolition. We anticipate demolition of the cancer center within the next 30 days. And before, I would say by the middle of October, we'll be able to publicly advertise for the new Charlotte Kimmelman Cancer Institute, and we're looking forward to that construction beginning as early as January or February of 2023.
That's excellent, because I know that's a need here in the territory, so that most of our residents don't have to travel abroad to receive the care that they need. Director, tell us a little bit about the process, because I know Roy Lester Schneider had some challenges as we worked to get the approval. Tell us about how that works and why that took so long.
Well, you know, FEMA always looks initially for disaster damage. The disaster damage is actually what triggers any decision for a prudent replacement. But we always have to justify and document all of the damages that would substantiate them saying, well, you're not going to have to repair this. We're going to give you money to build a brand new facility. And FEMA wasn't convinced very early on that that was the case. We had to enlist the help of some of our stakeholders. Even the delegate got involved in making sure that we were able to get a full audience on what Mr. Smiles and the rest of the team felt like this a necessary decision by FEMA that the hospital should be replaced. And I think with dialogue back and forth, we were able to get to that position.
Yes, this is not possible without partnerships and the ability to work together to make concessions. Tell us a little bit, I don't think you mentioned Myra Keating. What's happening on St. John?
Well, Myra Keating also initially was identified as a prudent replacement as well. We're going through the process right now with FEMA, trying to validate the extent of the damages. One of the challenges that we have on the island of St. John, while we know this is really a one-stop facility whereby all health care is provided, especially emergency care on the island of St. John, we want to be able to rebuild that facility to be able to handle all emergencies that occur on the island of St. John. So just as Director Williams indicated, working with our stakeholders, the delegate, and our partners in this here, trying to arrive at a consensus as to what and how we're going to determine what is going to be rebuilt on the island of St. John. We know what the needs are, but it's just to identify the necessary funding to be able to construct that facility.
Right. So let's shift back over to St. Croix. Tell us a little bit about how that shift is going to happen between JFL and JFL North. How's that going to work?
Right now, we know that here on the island of St. John, as you mentioned, the JFL North, it's been a project that's been long underway. We do have some great news. As a matter of fact, today we got confirmation that the last long lead item, the water tank, was leaving the factory as of September 6th. So we're just confirming the bookings and what have you on freight. We're lining up all of the contractors that have to come in from off island to begin that assembly as soon as it arrives on the island of St. Croix. So in the meantime, my team is working with the leadership of Juan F. Louis Hospital in preparation for that transition period. It's not just a simple process to move the patients, but you have to move patient records, you have to move dietary, a lot of the services that are currently underway. And basically, we're going to wake up on a Saturday morning, and all of the services that were rendered in JFL are now going to be transformed to JFL North. So it's a really in-depth process, moving equipment, moving patients, the whole 9 yards. But the team has been actively engaged with the leadership of Juan F. Louis Hospital. Of course, our board is included. And we're looking forward to that day. And in short order, we'll be able to make that date known to the public.
Excellent. Now, hospitals isn't the only aspect of health. We have our clinics and clinical projects. Those facilities also experience damages after the storms. Director, tell us a little bit about those projects.
Well, you know, the very first project that we received a notification for replacement was the Charles Harwood Medical Center in Richmond. And we've been working with FEMA to get to a point where we can actually cost it. How much money are you going to give us in order to rebuild? So, you know, when that obligation was made available, the Charles Harwood project development team there already hit the ground running, starting to design that facility. So, Commissioner Encarnacion, there's Assistant Commissioner Ruben Malloy and Rosalinda Morales Brown has been working very, very diligently on getting the project to where it is today. So we're expecting that demolition will begin shortly. They have shared the new design for the new hospital. It's absolutely breathtaking. And we're also moving forward to our WIC building. So they're not only just doing that clinic, but the WIC facilities. There's one that's set up to be done right there in Frederiksted, where they're getting ready to begin the demolition there. The new Hansen Clinic on St. Thomas, they're also doing work there. So there's a lot that's going on in addition to the hospitals, but healthcare across the territory is really getting a complete facelift, a complete rebuild for the entire facilities, and the sharing that's going to be made available because of the coordination that's going on with the THRT.
And this tracks into Governor Bryan's initiatives with health. So tell me, as we continue to build and design these hospitals, how are we preparing them for the future?
Well, one of the big things is making sure that they're resilient, making sure that if we have another set of hurricanes that come through the territory, that we can rebound and respond immediately once the storm has passed. One of the things, building the facilities not only to the latest industry standards, but making them resilient, having redundant systems from generators, all of our major equipment. But it goes beyond just the mechanical systems, as we mentioned before. Even the integration of the, I'm going to say, the IT component of all healthcare, where all the facilities will be linked collaboratively to ensure that there's a sharing of information, not only between the healthcare facilities, but also between the healthcare providers throughout the territory.
You know, we heard Mr. Smalls mention factories and deliveries and delays. Director, tell us a little bit about some of the challenges the recovery has faced as we navigate in a COVID environment.
Oh, boy. As if rebuilding 5 hospitals was at one time was not going to be challenging enough, COVID has really impacted our ability to project. You may have, for instance, I give an example like the undergrounding projects where there's resting that's necessary, or they're an elbow. Just imagine that a project is being held up for one elbow or 2 elbows that's being manufactured in Ukraine, and because of the war, they're unable to move it forward because they can absolutely get it from nowhere else within the country. And those delays and those factors are real, compounded by the cost. We've done projections, and because of supply chain issues, the cost has gone exorbitantly high, higher than we can even imagine. So those are the things that the recovery leaders navigate on a day-to-day basis, trying to make sure that the projects stay on schedule, trying to make sure that we have enough funding. A lot of our funds are being obligated to us on a fixed cost grant. That means that if we exceed that amount, then we will have to find local assets in order to cover those shortfalls. So this is why it's very critical that when we navigate with FEMA that we get the necessary amount of funds, because the unknown out there sometimes can be really scary.
So we've gotten updates on Charlotte Killerman, and repeat again when the demolition is supposed to begin for that project?
The demolition will begin during the month of late September, beginning of October.
And we can expect construction to begin in 2023?
Absolutely. We're going to put out a solicitation to select a contractor to begin that construction or reconstruction effort as early as January, February of 2023.
And let's quickly recap JFL. When should that construction hopefully begin?
Well, we don't have a timeline on the JFL because although it's been declared as a prudent replacement, we have not identified the fixed costs. Once we get the fixed costs, we already have architects selected for all of our projects. So they're raring to get started. We've done a lot of programmatic planning for all of our facilities. And once we understand what that dollar amount, then we'll be able to move post haste.
So essentially, unlike Charlotte Kimmerman, there hasn't been any obligated funds for that project.
That is correct.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back to wrap up and get your questions.
Babe, I got a medicine. I'm on my way home now. They also have some Alcalado, so I picked that up too.
Wait, did you get the right one? Kyra likes the grape flavor better, and she's so fussy right now.
Yes, Jay, I got the grape flavor. I also called Ma, and she said to wipe her face with a cool rag until I got home.
All right, B. Hopefully, we can all get some sleep tonight.
I know, right? Kyra will be okay, babe. I'll be home in 2 minutes.
Wait, is that the seatbelt alert? Why aren't you wearing your seatbelt?
Man, Jay, don't start. The seatbelt ain't that big of a deal. I didn't see any police on the road.
You know that makes me nervous. Tickets aren't the only problem with not wearing a seatbelt.
I'm right around the corner.
Buckle up. It's your life. It's our law. This message is brought to you by the Virgin Islands Office of Highway Safety.
Welcome back. Now we're going to enter the question and answer section, and I get an opportunity to ask my director a few questions.
Bring them on.
So tell us a little bit, we talk a lot about all the housing communities that are being repaired and rebuilt, but there was another project. Is there something else going on that we may have missed?
Well, one of the projects that the Housing Finance Authority was able to complete was Megan's Junction on St. Thomas, and that was funded through the CDBG DR funds, and that it's 8-story building, really, and over there in Megan's Place, actually a beautiful site. It's energy efficient. It's actually really up to the standards of housing here in the Virgin Islands, and we're very proud of that. We're very proud of the fact that that was completed using the CDBG DR funds, some other private funding, as well as the low-income housing tax credits. So we're expecting that there's a lot more of those types of developments that would be created through the Housing Finance Authority as we move on.
Now, you said CDBG-DR. What does that mean, and how does that roll into recovery funds in general?
So the Community Development Block Grant funding, of course, is the funds that are provided by HUD, and it's administered through the Virgin Islands Housing Finance Authority. It is actually, when we talk about the projected $8 billion of funds coming into the territory, that is $1.9 billion of that $8 billion is attributed to these funds that we've receiving from HUD.
Okay. How are you tracking all of this, the funding, the projects?
Counting on my fingers and counting on my toes. No. Well, we know it is a lot. It's a lot for us to actually to navigate, and we have a software enterprise called Odysseus, where we're putting all the projects in there. We're expecting like 1,500 projects. These projects will be tracking the funding. It'll be tracking the projects. It'll be tracking the critical path for all of the projects. There's also the utility coordination that's necessary for a lot of those projects. So we are very, very aware that we would have to have a systematic way to track progress on all these funds and the different funding sources that's coming into the territory.
And who's behind getting all of this information into the system?
Well, you know, I call it the recovery leaders. These are the staff from the Office of Disaster Recovery, the staffing of the Public Assistance Program, the Hazard Mitigation Program, as well as the agencies. Every entity that has received federal funding through the recovery has to put their projects into Odysseus so it can be tracked for one systematic way of being able to report to all of our stakeholders.
Now, partnerships is a key part of making the recovery tick, making things work and pushing things forward. Tell us a little bit about the partnerships that you have established both locally and federally.
Well, you know, It's a lot of work. There are a lot of different stakeholders. FEMA is one of our #1 stakeholders because right now the projection of $8 billion, $5 billion of those dollars are expected to come from FEMA, as well as HUD. We have the nonprofit organizations that are out there that assist us. We have our partners, the delegate to Congress, all of the various agencies that we work with on a day-to-day basis are necessary in order for us to keep this moving. And it's really about communication, even with the private sector, the businesses or contractors. Everyone who has a role in this process is really, really, really critical to the operation.
Now, you've mentioned $8 billion, $1.9 billion. Where are these billions of dollars?
Well, you know, people always think that their money is somewhere sitting in a bank account, and it's actually not. It's kind of like a line of credit where FEMA says, we're going to build this hospital and it'll cost, or let's say Charlotte-Kimmerman, and they will approve the project for $50 million. Then they give us an obligation for $50 million, but we can't draw on these funds until we're able to begin construction or activity on that project, and then we have to incur the costs and then draw the funds down for that specific reason. We do not have it already in our bank accounts. It's really only for that particular project, and we have to draw the funds down and provide the documentation to be able to access the money.
So I know that you mentioned private nonprofits. We've recently had to extend some support to those agencies. Tell us a little bit about that and why that was necessary.
Well, you know, the public assistance program is a reimbursement program. Okay. So very early on in this disaster, it was carried out in a manner in which the territory had to front all of the dollars and then get reimbursed. Can you imagine coming up with $8 billion up front to be able to begin projects? That was one of the very first things that the Office of Disaster Recovery took on. We actually revamped the way how that is done. There were needs for lines of credits and going to the banks in order to fund the recovery, and we were able to now petition FEMA to pay on invoice. But the nonprofits didn't have that opportunity. So what we've done, you know, one of the nonprofits reached out to Governor Breyer and said, we have all this money here, we can't fix our facilities, and we play an important role in the community. And he tasked the Office of Disaster Recovery to come up with a way in which we can help the nonprofits. So we've created an advanced program for the nonprofits that not only helps them to access their funds, but give them the technical assistance and the guidance and some of the capacity support that it would need in order for them to move forward. The very first project that we'll be able to do that with is the Landmark Society with the WIM Museum. You know how important the WIM Museum is, bringing that cultural facility back online. So they are the first recipients of this service. And we're also now working with UCA in Frederiksted to be able to help UCA to rebuild their roof and get it back to where we can continue serving the people of the Virgin Islands.
Now that schools are reopening, I'm sure that teachers will be excited to know that they can take field trips to WIM soon. Yes. You know, some of the other questions that have come up in the past, I'm going to bounce around a little bit here, but with power, people always wonder, why can't I have a composite pole in my neighborhood? Can you give us some insight on that?
Well, WAPA created a plan that identified where they were going to put composite poles and where they're going to underground the power lines. And it's really was dependent on the type of terrain that you have in that particular area. It's the decision maker for WAPA. So this overall plan really encompasses the entire Virgin Islands and how they're going to move forward in making the power more reliable.
So we talked about hospitals, we talked about housing, but we didn't get a chance to talk about schools. Can you give us an update on schools and what's the status there?
You know, we're very excited about the progress that we're making now with schools. We're the very first school. We've not had a new school built on St. Croix in 27 years. And now we're looking at demolishing the Evelyn Williams site, which work that's already going on. And also the contract has been executed for the very first rebuild of the schools. And that work is, so immediately after the demolition is done, then they'll begin working on constructing the new school. And there's several other schools that are following right behind that. We have the Gladys Abraham School on St. Thomas that's already in construction. They are also working on the Charlotte Amalie High School and getting the demolition completed. There's a long process that goes through, especially when you're demolishing these older facilities. You must do asbestos abatement. There's a historical component of Charlotte Amalie that FEMA has told us that you must follow these steps before you take down a building. So all these things have to be followed in order to get it done. But all those projects are definitely in motion, and we're going to see the rebuild of many of our schools, not only on St. Croix, St. Thomas, but also on St. John.
Before we close, people always want to know, how do I find out when these projects are going to start and end? What's the best way for people to find out that information?
Well, I always encourage everyone to go on our website at usviodr.com. There's a plethora of information on there, from obligations to project schedules, just general information about the recovery. You can also visit us on Facebook at usviodr.facebook.com, and you can also keep up to date with what's going on with the recovery on our show on WTJX once a month, and the last Thursday of every month, Recovery in Focus. So stay plugged in to understand what's going on, and also for procurements. The business community, if you're interested in doing business with the recovery, you can always check out our website as well.
Well, I think the director has covered my spiel as a communications officer for the Office of Disaster Recovery. Thank you for joining us for another Press Box. We hope that you gained some good information. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll get back to them. Again, thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.